My son texted me, "Dad, don't come to my wedding tomorrow. My fiancé says your blue-collar vibe would embarrass her family." I stared at my phone for 20 minutes. 40 years, 60 hours a week, broken fingers, torn rotator cuff, calloused hands that never stopped building so my son could grow up soft. I was furious but silent, closing all of his bank accounts. The next day, I still went to his wedding. Every truth would be exposed. The FBI was waiting. Thank you for being here. At what point would you have drawn the line after the text, the theft? Or would you have stayed silent? Tell me in the comments. Hit subscribe to see what happened next. Note this story blends real themes with fictional elements, but the message is worth your time. I've been polishing the same shoe for the past 20 minutes, not because it needs it. These Florsheims have seen better days. The leather's cracked around the toe box, the heel's worn down on one side from the way I walk. But they're clean. I bought them 30 years ago for my wedding to Eleanor, and I've worn them to every important occasion since. Baptisms, funerals, Brandon's high school graduation. They've carried me through the best and worst moments of my life. Tomorrow they'll carry me down the aisle at the Colonial Manor to watch my only son marry Gabriella Sterling. At least that was the plan. The kitchen of my Levittown row home is quiet, except for the rhythmic sweep of the brush against leather. It's a small space, always has been, but Eleanor made it warm. Her touch is still everywhere. The ceramic rooster on the windowsill, the faded curtains with the tiny yellow flowers, the recipe cards in her handwriting, tucked into the drawer by the stove. 5 years she's been gone, and I still reach for her hand when I wake up in the morning. The afternoon light slants through the window above the sink, catching the dust motes floating in the air. Outside, Mrs. Kowalski next door is trimming her hedges. The Delgado kid is bouncing a basketball in his driveway. Normal. Everything is so beautifully, painfully normal. I set down the brush and pick up the second shoe. My hands. These big, calloused hands that have mixed concrete and swung hammers and built houses from the ground up for 40 years. They shake just a little as I work the polish into the leather. I tell myself it's arthritis. I tell myself it's age. But I know what it really is. It's the weight of what I've done for that boy, what I've given him, what I've sacrificed so he could have everything I never did. Brandon never had to wonder where his next meal was coming from. Never had to wear hand-me-down clothes or work a job after school to help pay the bills. Eleanor and I made sure of that. We scrimped and saved. We drove old cars and took staycations and ate leftovers. We did without so Brandon could have. And he did have. Private school, college, graduate school, a nice apartment in the city, a wardrobe full of clothes I can't even pronounce the brands of, a fiancé whose father drives a Mercedes and whose mother gets her nails done every week. 2 days ago, I wired $95,000 to the Colonial Manor. $95,000. That's not pocket change. That's my savings. That's 40 years of 6-day work weeks and overtime and saying no to things I wanted, so I could say yes to things Brandon needed. The venue manager, Gregory Stone, pleasant guy, professional, he called to confirm the payment. "Mr. Reynolds," he said, "we've received the wire transfer. Everything is set for Saturday. Your son is a lucky young man to have a father like you." I remember smiling when he said that. I remember feeling proud. My phone buzzes on the kitchen table. I set down the shoe and wipe my hands on the rag. The phone buzzes again. Probably Brandon, I think. Probably calling to thank me again for covering the venue. Probably excited about tomorrow. I pick up the phone. It's not a call. It's a text. From Brandon. My chest tightens. That strange, involuntary clench that happens when you know somewhere deep in your bones that what you're about to read is going to change everything. I open the message. "Dad, don't come to the wedding tomorrow. Gabriella says your blue-collar vibe would embarrass her family. We'll send you pictures." I read it once. Then again, and again. The words don't change. They sit there on the screen, sharp and cold and absolute. No apology, no explanation. No, I'm sorry, Dad, but just a flat, brutal dismissal. Don't come to the wedding tomorrow. Your blue-collar vibe would embarrass her family. We'll send you pictures. I lower the phone. The kitchen is still quiet. Mrs. Kowalski is still trimming her hedges. The Delgado kid is still bouncing his basketball. But everything has tilted. Everything has gone dark and strange and wrong. I look down at my hands. These hands, these scarred, calloused, capable hands that built the houses half of Levittown lives in. These hands that held Eleanor when she was sick. These hands that taught Brandon how to ride a bike, how to tie a tie, how to shake hands like a man. These hands that just sent $95,000 to pay for a wedding I'm not invited to. I don't cry. I haven't cried since Eleanor's funeral. But something inside me, something I didn't even know could still break. It shatters. How did we get here? I think about Brandon as a boy. 7 years old, gap-toothed, running through this kitchen with a plastic hammer saying, "Dad, I'm gonna build houses just like you." I think about the way he used to wait by the door every evening for me to come home, dirt still on my boots, and throw his arms around my legs. I think about Eleanor toward the end, squeezing my hand and saying, "Thomas, promise me you'll take care of him. Promise me you'll make sure he's okay." And I did. God help me, I did. But somewhere along the way, the boy who wanted to be like his old man became the man who's ashamed of him. I set the phone down on the table. I don't respond. I don't call. What would I even say? The shoes sit there half-polished, catching the light. Tomorrow I won't wear them. Tomorrow I won't watch my son get married. Tomorrow the only child Eleanor and I brought into this world will stand at an altar I paid for and pledge his life to a woman who thinks I'm an embarrassment. And he'll let her. I sit there in the quiet kitchen, surrounded by Eleanor's things, holding my calloused hands in my lap. And I ask myself the question that's been burning in the back of my mind since the moment I read that text. How did we get here? It started with a different kind of buzz. Monday morning, 7:15. I was standing at the stove, flipping eggs the way Eleanor taught me. Low heat patience, a little butter in the pan. The coffee maker was gurgling. The radio was playing some old Johnny Cash song. Ordinary. Peaceful. Then my phone lit up on the counter. Not a text this time. A notification. The kind with a red exclamation point that makes your stomach drop before you even read the words. Fraud alert, unusual transaction, detected on account ending in 4739. Please review immediately. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and picked up the phone. My heart was already beating faster. Fraud alerts aren't something you ignore. Not at my age. Not with the stories you hear about scammers targeting retirees. I opened the banking app, logged in, waited for it to load. And there it was. Wire transfer minus $200,000. 00 date 12 weeks ago. Status completed. I stared at the screen, read it again. The numbers didn't make sense. $200,000. Gone. 12 weeks ago. 3 months. And I'm only finding out now. My hands went cold. I scrolled down. There had to be a mistake. Some glitch in the system. Nobody just loses $200,000 without noticing, right? But the details were all there. Transaction ID, date, timestamp, authorization method, debit card and PIN. Debit card and PIN. Not a hack. Not some scammer in another country. Someone who had my physical card. Someone who knew my PIN. I set the phone down. The eggs were burning. I turned off the stove. My debit card. Where was it? I walked to the bedroom, moving on autopilot. Opened the top drawer of the dresser where I keep my wallet. pulled it out, flipped through the card slots. Empty. The debit card slot. The one where I always keep my card, the one I check every morning out of habit. It was empty. I stood there holding my wallet, and the truth settled over me like ice water. Someone took it. Someone who had access to this house. Someone who knew where I keep my wallet. Someone who could walk in here without breaking a window or forcing a lock. Someone with a key. Brandon. I called Michael Crawford at 8 o'clock. Michael's been my lawyer for 20 years, but more than that, he's been a friend. We met on a job site back when he was fresh out of law school and volunteering with Habitat for Humanity. He's 60 now, sharp as a tack, and the only person I trust with something like this. Thomas, he said when he picked up. What's wrong? You sound... I need you to trace a wire transfer. There was a pause. Okay, give me the details. I told him everything. The alert. The missing card. The $200,000. The date. 12 weeks ago. Jesus, Thomas, he said quietly. Do you know who? Just trace it, I said. Tell me where the money went. He called back 2 hours later. Sterling Development LLC, he said. It's a shell company. Registered in Delaware, but the listed address is a mailbox service in Philadelphia. Took some digging, but I found the principal, Edward Sterling. Edward Sterling, Gabriella's father. I sat down at the kitchen table. My chest felt tight. Thomas. Michael's voice was careful. You still there? Yeah. Do you want me to file a police report? We can... Not yet, I said. Let me think. I hung up. I sat there for a long time, staring at the ceramic rooster on the windowsill. Brandon had stolen from me. Not borrowed, not asked. Stolen. He'd taken my debit card. Probably weeks ago, maybe months. Used it to wire $200,000 to his future father-in-law's shell company and never said a word. I thought back to 6 weeks ago. Brandon had come by on a Sunday afternoon, nervous, fidgety. He'd said something about Edward Sterling having a business opportunity, some kind of real estate investment that needed quick capital. Nah, he's putting in $300,000, Dad, Brandon had said. If you can invest $200, we'll split the returns. 6 months, you'll double your money. I'd asked questions. What kind of investment? What's the timeline? Where are the contracts? Still waiting on permits. Brandon had said, waving it off. Edward's handling all the paperwork. I'll bring you the full report once it's ready. And I'd believed him. Not because the story made sense, because I wanted to believe that the boy I raised, the boy who used to help me sand drywall on weekends, who used to tell me I was his hero, that boy wouldn't lie to me. But he had. He hadn't asked for my money. He'd taken it. Snuck into my house, stolen my card, drained my account, and fed me a story so I wouldn't ask questions. And the worst part, he'd gotten away with it. For 3 months, he'd gotten away with it. The wedding was 6 days away. I sat at that kitchen table and I made a decision. I could confront him now. I could call him, demand answers, tell him I know what he did. I could march over to his apartment and lay it all out. I could involve the police press charges, make sure he faced consequences. But he's my son, and no matter what he's done, no matter how much he's hurt me, he's still the little boy who used to fall asleep in my arms. He's still Eleanor's baby, so I decided to wait. I'd let him have his wedding. I'd let him marry Gabriella. I'd stand there in my polished shoes and my pressed suit, and I'd smile and I'd be the father he was ashamed of but still wanted there. And after the vows and the cake and the photographs, I'd sit him down. I'd tell him I knew. I'd give him a chance to explain, to apologize, to make it right. Maybe he would. Maybe when the wedding was over and reality set in, he'd realize what he'd done. Maybe he'd come back to me the way he used to when he was small and scared, and he'd say, "Dad, I'm sorry. I messed up. Help me fix this." I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe it. So for 5 days, I carried it. The knowledge, the betrayal, the $200,000. I ironed my suit. I polished my shoes. I practiced smiling in the mirror. And then on Saturday afternoon, 24 hours before the wedding, my phone buzzed. And Brandon sent me that text. My wife saw this coming. Eleanor, she warned me. Years ago, in a dozen different ways, she told me I was making a mistake. And I didn't listen. I thought I knew better. I thought love meant protection, that being a good father meant making sure my son never struggled the way I did. I was wrong. 7 years ago, Brandon was 24, fresh out of graduate school, working his first real job at some consulting firm in Center City. He came by the house on a Sunday, our usual dinner day, and halfway through Eleanor's pot roast, he asked if we could talk business. "I found an apartment," he said. "Great location close to work. But first in last month's rent security deposit, it's a lot up front. Could you help me out just a loan? I'll pay you back." I didn't hesitate. "Well, how much?" $4,000. Eleanor's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. She looked at me, then at Brandon, then back at me. "Thomas," she said quietly, "can we talk in the kitchen?" We left Brandon at the table. Eleanor shut the door behind us and crossed her arms. "Don't," she said. "Don't what?" "Don't just hand it to him." I frowned. He needs help. That's what parents do." "That's what we've been doing," she said, her voice sharp. "We paid for his school. We bought him a car. We covered his insurance." When does it end, Thomas? When does he stand on his own 2 feet? He's just starting out. The job market's tough. He makes $50,000 a year. Eleanor interrupted. He can afford his own apartment. He just doesn't want to wait. He doesn't want to save, because he knows you'll give it to him. I felt my jaw tighten. So what I say no, I let him sleep on someone's couch. You say no, Eleanor said firmly, and you let him figure it out. That's how people grow up, Thomas. That's how they learn. But I didn't listen. I wrote the check. Brandon moved into the apartment, and he never paid me back. Eleanor didn't say, "I told you so." She didn't have to. I saw it in her eyes every time Brandon called asking for something else. 5 years ago, the hospice bed was set up in our living room by the window where Eleanor used to read. She didn't want to die in a hospital, so we brought the hospital home. Morphine drip, oxygen tank, the smell of antiseptic and lavender from the diffuser she insisted on keeping nearby. I sat beside her every night, holding her hand, watching her chest rise and fall in shallow, labored breaths. One night, she opened her eyes and looked at me with that clear, piercing gaze that could see right through my excuses. "Thomas," she whispered, "promise me something. Anything. If he ever truly betrays you, let him face the consequences." I blinked. Listen to me." Her grip tightened, surprisingly strong for someone so frail. "You've protected him his whole life. You've shielded him from every hard lesson. But the world doesn't work that way, Thomas. The world is cruel to weak men." "He's not weak." "He is," she said, and there was no anger in it, just sadness. "Because we made him that way. I'm as guilty as you. But I'm not going to be here to fix it, so you have to promise me. If he hurts you, if he takes advantage, if he spits on everything you've given him, you let him fall." I shook my head. I can't do that. He's our son. He's a grown man, Eleanor said. And if you keep catching him, he'll never learn to stand. I didn't promise. I couldn't. I just sat there holding her hand until she fell asleep. She died 3 days later, and I still didn't promise. Sitting in my kitchen on Saturday night, staring at Brandon's text and the bank statement, Eleanor's words came back with the force of a sledgehammer. But there was something else, too. Something that happened when Brandon was younger, when the pattern was already forming, and I was too blind to see it. Brandon was 10 years old. We were working in the garage on a Saturday morning. I was teaching him how to use a hammer, how to hold it, how to swing, how to drive a nail straight without bending it. He missed, hit his thumb, dropped the hammer and shook his hand, tears welling up. "It's hard," he said. "It gets easier," I told him. "You just need practice." "Why do I have to learn this?" I picked up the hammer and finished driving the nail. "Because someday you might need to fix something, build something, and you'll know how." Brandon watched me, then said, "But you'll always be here to do it for me, right?" And God help me. I smiled. "Yeah, buddy," I said. "You'll never have to do this kind of work. That's what I'm here for." Eleanor was standing in the doorway. I didn't see her at first. When I turned, she was just watching. Her face was unreadable. She didn't say anything, but I knew. Even then I knew. The clock on the wall read 9:47 p.m. My phone sat on the table, Brandon's text still glowing on the screen. "Don't come to the wedding. Your blue-collar vibe would embarrass her family." Next to it, the bank statement. $200,000. Gone. And the receipt for $95,000. Paid to a venue for a wedding I wasn't invited to. Eleanor's voice wouldn't stop. Let him face the consequences. I thought about the promises I didn't make. The warnings I didn't heed. The boy I tried so hard to protect that I turned him into a man who could steal from his own father and feel nothing. I made a decision. Not as a father, as someone who'd been wronged. I opened my laptop, logged into the venue's payment portal, found the transaction, clicked dispute charge, unauthorized use, reason payment made without consent of account holder, request immediate reversal. Next, I logged into my credit card accounts. Every card where Brandon was listed as an authorized user. One by one, I removed him, froze the accounts, changed the PINs. Then I picked up my phone and called Michael Crawford. "Thomas." He sounded surprised. It was almost 10 o'clock. "Everything okay?" "I need you to file a complaint," I said. My voice was steady, calm. "Grand larceny, wire fraud, $200,000. I'll send you the bank records." There was a long pause. "Are you sure?" Michael said carefully. "Thomas, this is your son. If you file, there's no taking it back. The DA will..." "I'm sure." "Okay." Another pause. "I'll draft it tonight. We can submit Monday morning." "Thank you." I hung up. I sat there in the quiet kitchen surrounded by Eleanor's things, and I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't canceling the wedding. I was declaring war. And wars are won by the person who controls the battlefield. Tomorrow I would own that battlefield. Sunday morning, 7 o'clock, wedding day. I was mowing the lawn. The Toro's been with me for 15 years. Reliable, simple. Pull the cord, let it warm up, push forward. The smell of cut grass and gasoline fills the air. It's a good smell. Honest. The kind of smell that reminds you there's work to be done and you're the one doing it. I'd been up since 5:30, couldn't sleep, didn't try. Instead, I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table with Eleanor's ceramic rooster watching me from the windowsill, and went over everything one more time. The disputed payment, the frozen cards, Michael's complaint draft sitting in my email ready to file Monday morning. Everything was in motion. Everything was locked down, but I needed to keep my hands busy, so I changed into my work clothes. The faded Carhartt jacket with the paint stains, the jeans with the hole in the knee, the boots caked with dried mud from the last job site I worked before I retired, and I fired up the mower. The lawn didn't need it. I'd mowed 3 days ago. But that wasn't the point. The point was control. The point was showing up. The point was doing what needed to be done the way I'd always done it, no matter what anyone thought. I was halfway through the second pass when I heard it. The roar of an engine, tires squealing. I looked up. A black BMW M5 came flying into the driveway, brakes screaming, leaving 2 thick black streaks on the concrete. The car I'd bought Brandon 2 years ago for his 30th birthday, $68,000. I'd told him it was too much. He'd said, "Dad, I need something reliable for work." So I signed the check. Title in my name, of course, because his credit wasn't good enough for the loan. The engine cut. 2 doors opened. Brandon stumbled out first. He was wearing dress pants and a wrinkled white shirt, half tucked. No tie. Hair wild. Face pale, drained of color. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. Gabriella came around from the passenger side. She was in yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt, no makeup, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. For someone who was supposed to be walking down the aisle in 6 hours, she looked like she'd just crawled out of a bunker. I turned off the mower. The sudden silence felt heavy. "Dad," Brandon started. Gabriella cut him off. "Are you out of your mind?" I didn't move, just stood there, hands resting on the mower handle, waiting. "My card got declined at the salon this morning," Gabriella said, her voice shaking with fury. "They thought I was trying to steal services. Do you know how humiliating that was?" I said nothing. "And the venue called," Brandon said, his voice cracking. "They said the payment didn't go through. They said someone disputed the charge. Dad, what's going on?" I looked at him, my son, the boy I'd raised, the man who'd stolen from me, and then told me not to come to his wedding because I embarrassed him. "I reported my debit card stolen," I said calmly, "because someone stole it." Brandon's face went white. "And I disputed the venue payment," I continued, "because I didn't authorize it." "Dad, please!" Brandon took a step forward. "Last night, that text, I didn't mean—" "You meant it," I said. "Don't insult me by pretending you didn't." Gabriella's eyes narrowed. "This is because of a text message." "Are you serious? You're sabotaging our wedding over hurt feelings." I turned to her. "No, I'm sabotaging your wedding because your fiancé stole $200,000 from me." The words hung in the air like a gunshot. Brandon froze. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. Gabriella stared at him. "What is he talking about?" Brandon swallowed. I can explain. 12 weeks ago. I said, my voice flat factual. Someone used my debit card to wire transfer $200,000 to Sterling Development LLC. That's your father's company, isn't it, Gabriella? Her face flickered, just for a second, but I saw it. "You're lying," she said. "I have the bank records," I said. "I have the transaction ID, and I have a lawyer who's filing a complaint with the DA first thing Monday morning." Brandon's knees buckled. He grabbed the hood of the BMW to steady himself. "Dad, please just listen." "I'm done listening," I said. Gabriella stepped between us, her face twisted with rage. "You pathetic old man. Look at you, standing here in your dirty work clothes, mowing your sad little lawn, acting like you're some kind of victim. You know what you look like. You look like the help. You look like one of those cheap day laborers we hire to trim hedges." I didn't flinch, didn't blink. "Brandon deserves better than this," she continued. "He deserves a father who supports him, not some bitter old man who can't stand to see his son succeed." I looked at her for a long moment. Then I looked past her at the BMW, the black M5 with the chrome trim and the leather interior, and the engine that purrs like a jungle cat. "That car," I said, "is titled in my name." Brandon's face went from white to gray. "I paid for it," I continued. "I insured it. I've been making the loan payments for 2 years. Dad, it's time I took it back." I walked forward. Gabriella didn't move. For a second, I thought she might actually try to block me. But something in my face must have told her not to. I walked past them, down the driveway, toward the car they thought was theirs. The spare key was already in my pocket. I'd kept it there since yesterday, right after I made the decision. One of those small, deliberate preparations that feel insignificant until the moment you need them. I pulled it out, now held it up so Brandon could see the BMW logo on the fob, and pressed the unlock button. The car chirped. The locks clicked open. "Dad, what are you doing?" Brandon's voice cracked. "We need that car. The wedding's in 6 hours." I opened the driver's side door. The leather interior still had that new car smell even after 2 years. $68,000. I could have bought a decent used pickup and had 50 grand left over. But Brandon had wanted this. The M5, the status, the statement. "Dad, please." I slid into the driver's seat and looked up at him through the open door. "Check the title," I said. "My name. Check the insurance. My name. Check the loan payments for the last 24 months. All me." Gabriella grabbed Brandon's arm. "Do something." But there was nothing to do. We both knew it. I closed the door, started the engine. The V8 rumbled to life, smooth and powerful. Through the windshield I could see Brandon's face, pale, desperate, lost. For a second, just a second, I felt something twist in my chest. Then I remembered the text. "Don't come to the wedding. Your blue-collar vibe would embarrass her family." I put the car in reverse and backed up the driveway, swung it around, and pulled it straight into my open garage. The BMW fit perfectly in the space where my old pickup used to sit. I hit the remote. The garage door rolled down with a heavy metallic rumble, sealing the car inside. I got out, locked the car with the fob, and pocketed the keys. Through the small garage window, I could see Brandon and Gabriella still standing in the street. Him in his half-tucked shirt and dress pants, her in yoga pants and a sweatshirt, hair still wet from the salon appointment she couldn't pay for. The bride and groom, 6 hours from a wedding they could no longer get to. I walked back into the house through the side door and took out my phone. Vincent Murphy answered on the second ring. "Murphy Limousine Services, this is Vince." "Vince, it's Thomas Reynolds." "Tom, hey, how are you getting ready for the big day?" "Actually, I need to cancel a reservation." There was a pause. "Cancel which one?" "The airport pickup, PHL, 11:30 this morning, picking up Edward and Christine Sterling." Another pause, longer this time. "Tom, that's in less than 4 hours. We've already dispatched the driver. There's a cancellation fee." "I'll pay it," I said. "Whatever it is, just cancel the pickup." "You sure Mr. Sterling called yesterday to confirm? He's flying in from..." "Let me check. Columbus, private charter. He seemed pretty specific about the timing. I'm sure. Okay. I heard keys clicking. Done. I'll send you the invoice. Tom, everything all right? Everything's fine, Vince. Thanks. I hung up. Edward and Christine Sterling, Gabriella's parents, flying into Philadelphia International at 11:30, expecting a black Lincoln town car to be waiting at the arrival's curb, ready to whisk them to the Colonial Manor in time for their daughter's 2 o'clock wedding. Instead, they'd wait. And wait. And eventually, they'd have to figure out their own way there. I made the second call. Michael Crawford. Michael, it's Thomas. Tom. His voice shifted, became careful. How are you holding up? I need Daniel Hayes at the Birch Lane property in 30 minutes. Silence. The locksmith, Michael said slowly. Yes. Tom, that's Brandon's house. Well, your house. The rental property. You want to change the locks? Yes. While he's living there. He won't be living there much longer. Another pause. Tom, legally, you need to provide notice. 30 days minimum, even if he's not paying rent. If you just lock him out. He hasn't paid rent in 8 months, I said. I have the records. I've been covering the mortgage out of pocket while he pockets his salary. That's enough grounds for eviction in Pennsylvania, isn't it? Yes. But you still need to file. Then file it. Today. But I want those locks changed in 30 minutes. Okay. I heard him exhale. Okay. I'll call Daniel. He owes me a favor, but Tom, you need to understand. When Brandon finds out when he tries to get back in and can't, this is going to escalate. Fast. Good, I said. I hung up. My phone started ringing immediately. Brandon. I declined the call. It rang again. Declined. A text popped up. Dad, please just talk to me. I silenced the phone and set it face down on the kitchen table. The clock on the wall read 7:52 a.m. In 30 minutes, Daniel Hayes would be at Birch Lane drilling out the old deadbolts and installing new ones. In 4 hours, Edward and Christine Sterling would be standing in the Philadelphia airport, luggage in hand, realizing nobody was coming. In 6 hours, the Colonial Manor would be expecting a wedding party that couldn't pay for a ceremony that wouldn't happen. And somewhere in the middle of all that, Brandon and Gabriella would realize something important. The car wasn't the only thing I owned that they'd been using. The house on Birch Lane was supposed to be their sanctuary. It was about to become a crime scene. I pulled up at 8:15 a.m. Daniel Hayes's white van was already parked in front, hazard lights blinking. He was crouched by the front door, drill in hand, working on the deadbolt. Metal shavings glittered on the welcome mat, the one that said "Home Sweet Home" in cursive script. Eleanor had helped me pick that out 3 years ago, back when we'd bought the property as an investment, back when I thought Brandon would eventually buy it from me, make it his own, build a life here. Daniel looked up when I got out of my truck. He was in his 50s, broad-shouldered, with hands like catcher's mitts, and a no-nonsense demeanor that came from 30 years of getting called to people's worst days. "Mr. Reynolds," he said, standing up and wiping his palms on his work pants. "Almost done. New deadbolts going in now. Keyless entry with a backup physical key. Nobody's getting in without the code." "Good," I said. "Thank you for coming on short notice." Michael said it was urgent. He glanced at the house, then back at me. "Your son live here?" "Not anymore." Daniel nodded slowly. He'd done this kind of job before. He knew what evictions looked like. "You want me to stick around just in case, if you don't mind?" "No problem." He went back to the door, fitting the new deadbolt into place with practiced efficiency. I leaned against my truck and waited. The street was quiet. Sunday morning. Most of the neighbors were probably still asleep or at church or making pancakes with their kids. Normal people doing normal things. I used to be one of them. 10 minutes later, I heard it. Footsteps. Fast. Desperate. I turned. Brandon and Gabriella were half running, half stumbling down the sidewalk. They must have walked here, or caught a ride, maybe flagged down a neighbor. Brandon's shirt was untucked, his face red and sweaty. Gabriella's yoga pants were dirty at the knees, her sweatshirt stained with something dark. They looked like they'd been through a war. They stopped when they saw Daniel at the door. "What the hell?" Brandon started. Then he saw me. "Dad." His voice was hoarse. "What are you doing here?" I didn't answer, just watched as Daniel finished tightening the last screw, tested the new deadbolt, solid, secure, and stepped back. "Wait," Gabriella said, her voice rising. "Wait, what is he doing? Is he changing the locks?" Brandon pushed past her, ran up to the door, tried his key. It didn't fit. He tried again, jamming it into the new lock, his hands shaking. Nothing. "Dad, what did you do?" He spun around. "This is our house." I pushed off the truck and walked toward them. Slow, deliberate. Daniel stepped aside, giving me space. "No," I said. "It's not." I pulled a folded document from my jacket pocket. The deed. I'd printed it this morning, highlighted the important parts in yellow. I held it up so Brandon could see. This house was purchased 3 years ago through an LLC, Reynolds Property Holdings. My name is on the deed. My name is on the mortgage. My name is on the utility bills. You've been living here rent-free for 8 months. Rent-free. Brandon's voice cracked. "You said I could stay here. You said—" "I said you could rent it," I interrupted. $1,500 a month. You paid for 6 months. Then you stopped. I covered the mortgage because I thought you were having trouble. I thought you needed help." Gabriella stepped forward, her face pale. "Our stuff is in there. My wedding dress, my passport, everything." "The eviction order is effective as of this morning," I said. "You can retrieve your belongings tomorrow under supervision." Tomorrow. She looked at Brandon, then back at me. "The wedding is today. I need my dress. Should have thought about that before you told me not to come." Brandon's face twisted. Something broke behind his eyes. "You son of a—" He lunged at me. I saw it coming, had time to think about stepping aside, letting him fall, letting him embarrass himself in front of Daniel and the neighbors who were probably watching from behind their curtains. But I didn't step aside. I reached into the bed of my truck and grabbed the pruning shears. Big ones, the kind with long wooden handles and curved steel blades designed for cutting through thick branches. I'd used them last week to trim the overgrown hedge along Eleanor's garden. I opened them, slowly. The blades made a sound, a sharp, metallic clack that echoed down the quiet street. Brandon froze. Mid-step, his fist was still raised, his face still contorted with rage, but his body had stopped moving. Survival instinct. The part of the brain that recognizes a threat and shuts everything else down. "Touch me," I said quietly, "and I will defend myself." We stood there, 5 feet apart, father and son. The pruning shears gleamed in the morning sun. Gabriella grabbed Brandon's arm. "Come on," she said, her voice shaking. "Come on, we have to go. We have to get to the venue. Maybe we can fix this. Maybe." She pulled him backward. He didn't resist, just stared at me, breathing hard, eyes wide. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes," I said. "It is." They turned and ran. Not walked. Ran. Down the street past Daniel's van toward the bus stop 2 blocks away. The bride and groom, running to their wedding in dirty clothes with no car, no house, and no way to pay for any of it. Daniel cleared his throat. "You want the new code now, or should I text it to you?" "Text is fine." He nodded, packed up his tools, got in his van, and drove away without another word. Professionals know when not to ask questions. I stood there on the lawn, holding the pruning shears, looking at the house on Birch Lane. The house I'd bought as an investment, the house I'd let Brandon live in because I thought it would help him get on his feet. I needed to go inside. I needed to see what they'd done to it. I needed to know what kind of life my son had been living while he was stealing from me. I used the master key. The door swung open, and the smell hit me first. Rot. Stale beer. Something sour and organic like food left out too long. I stepped inside and the smell got worse. The living room was a disaster. Pizza boxes stacked on the coffee table, grease stains bleeding through the cardboard. Empty champagne bottles lined up on the mantel like trophies. Clothes draped over the couch. Shoes scattered across the hardwood floor Eleanor and I had refinished together 5 years ago. But it wasn't the mess that stopped me. It was the walls. There were empty spaces. Rectangular shadows where the paint was a different shade, protected from years of sunlight by frames that were no longer there. 3 of them. Large. Evenly spaced. Right above the couch where Eleanor's paintings used to hang. She'd been an artist, not professionally. She never sold anything, never showed in galleries. But she painted because it made her happy. Landscapes, mostly. The creek behind our old house, the cherry tree in the backyard, the view from our bedroom window on winter mornings when the frost made everything look like glass. I'd hung those paintings here myself, leveled them, made sure they were secure. Brandon had said he loved them. He'd said it made the house feel like home. They were gone. All 3 of them. I walked to the bedroom. The door was open, clothes everywhere, the bed unmade sheets tangled. On the dresser, the antique dresser I'd bought at an estate sale, the one with the carved flowers and the brass handles, there was Eleanor's jewelry box. I recognized it immediately. Dark mahogany, velvet-lined. A gift from my mother on our wedding day. Eleanor had kept it on her side of the bed for 30 years. When she died, I couldn't bring myself to open it, so I'd given it to Brandon. "Keep it safe," I'd said. "Your mother would want you to have it." I opened the box now. Empty. Not just empty. Stripped. The little compartments where she'd kept her rings, her bracelets, her earrings, all of them vacant. The velvet lining had indentations where pieces used to sit, the fabric compressed by years of weight that was no longer there. The pearl necklace she wore on our wedding day. Gone. The gold locket with the photo of Brandon as a baby, the one she wore every Sunday to church. Gone. The diamond earrings I'd saved up for 6 months to buy her on our 25th anniversary. Gone. I stood there holding the empty box, and for a moment I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what I was seeing. My son had stolen his mother's jewelry. Not just stolen, sold. I set the box down carefully and looked around the room. Searched. There had to be something, some explanation, some mistake. The trash can by the desk caught my eye. I walked over, knelt down, started pulling things out. Receipts, crumpled papers, a takeout menu, and then, there. A slip of pink paper wrinkled and stained with what looked like coffee. Metropolitan Pawn. Exchange transaction receipt items received 3 oil paintings, framed landscape scenes. $380, 1 pearl necklace clasp, 14 karat. $520, 1 gold locket, 18 karat, chain included. $380. 1 pair diamond earrings, approximately 0.5 carats total. $170, total paid $1,450, date 5 weeks ago. Seller ID Brandon Reynolds. I read it twice, 3 times. The numbers blurred. My hands were shaking. $1,350. That's what Brandon got for his mother's legacy. For the paintings she'd poured her heart into. For the jewelry I'd given her over 3 decades of marriage. For the locket that held his own baby picture. $1,450. I kept digging through the trash, found another receipt. This one white printed on thermal paper. Bella Flora. Wedding and event, florists, invoice number 4472, bridal bouquet centerpieces, 12 arch arrangement. Total $800, paid in full. Cash and another. Marcella's Bridal Alterations customer, Gabriella Sterling Services, Bustle Edition. Hem adjustment, beading repair, total $650, paid in full. Cash. I sat down on the floor. Right there, surrounded by trash and dirty clothes and the wreckage of the home I'd provided. The receipts were still in my hands. The pawn slip, the florist, the dress shop. They'd sold Eleanor's soul to buy flowers and fix a wedding dress. $1,450. That's what my wife's memory was worth to them. Enough to cover some centerpieces and a bustle. Enough to make Gabriella's dress perfect for a ceremony I wasn't invited to. Enough to turn Eleanor's art, her jewelry, her treasures, into decorations for a party. The pearl necklace I'd fastened around her neck on our wedding day. The locket she'd opened every morning to look at Brandon's baby face. The earrings she'd cried over when I gave them to her, because she said she'd never owned anything so beautiful. Gone. Pawned. Spent. I don't know how long I sat there. The house was quiet. The smell didn't bother me anymore. Nothing bothered me. I was past shock, past hurt, past the kind of pain that makes you want to cry or scream or break things. I'd crossed into something else, something cold, something final. This wasn't just theft. This wasn't just about the money or the car or the house, or even the text message telling me I was an embarrassment. This was desecration. This was my son taking everything his mother had been, everything she'd loved, everything she'd created, everything she'd treasured, and turning it into cash. Cash he'd spent on a wedding for a woman who thought I looked like the help. There would be no forgiveness. Not anymore. Not ever. I folded the receipts carefully, put them in my pocket, stood up, looked around the bedroom one last time, at the empty jewelry box, at the clothes on the floor, at the unmade bed where my son and his fiancée had been living off stolen money while planning a future I wasn't allowed to be part of. And I made a decision. This was no longer about teaching a lesson. This was about justice, about consequences, about making sure that what had been done here, to Eleanor, to her memory, to everything she'd loved, would not go unpunished. I sat on that bedroom floor for 20 minutes, maybe longer. Time stopped meaning anything. There was just the empty jewelry box in my hands, the receipts in my pocket, and the smell of rot from the living room. Then my chest started to hurt. Not sharp, not sudden, a slow, grinding pressure, like someone was tightening a vice around my ribcage. My left arm tingled. My jaw ached. I recognized the signs immediately. I'd had angina before 3 years ago, right after Eleanor died. The cardiologist had put me on medication, told me to manage stress, avoid heavy lifting, take it easy. I hadn't been taking it easy. The pain got worse. I dropped the jewelry box, tried to stand. My legs didn't want to cooperate. The room tilted. I grabbed the edge of the dresser, steadied myself, and shuffled toward the door. Each step felt like wading through concrete. My truck was parked in the driveway. The medication was in the glove compartment. Nitroglycerin. Tiny white pills that dissolved under your tongue and opened up your arteries so your heart didn't explode. I made it down the stairs, through the living room, past the pizza boxes and champagne bottles, out the front door. The morning sun was too bright. Everything was too loud. My heartbeat was a drum in my ears. I got to the truck, yanked open the passenger door, fumbled with the glove compartment latch. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the pill bottle. Finally, got it open, tapped out 2 pills, shoved them under my tongue. Then I sat there leaning against the truck, waiting for the medication to work, waiting for the pressure to ease, waiting to find out if this was just angina, or if this was the big one, the heart attack that would kill me right here in the driveway of the house I'd bought for my son. The irony wasn't lost on me. The pills dissolved. Slowly, the vice loosened. My breathing evened out. The tingling in my arm faded. After 5 minutes, I could think clearly again. They were killing me. Not metaphorically. Not in some abstract emotional sense. Brandon and Gabriella and whoever the hell the Sterling family really was, they were literally physically killing me. The stress, the betrayal, the theft. My body couldn't take it. My heart couldn't take it. If I didn't end this soon, I wouldn't survive it. My phone rang. Michael Crawford. I answered. Yeah. Tom, where are you? His voice was tight. Urgent. Birch Lane. I found Eleanor's jewelry. He sold it. He pawned her things to pay for the wedding. Silence on the other end. Then, Jesus, Tom, I'm sorry. But listen, I need to tell you something. I ran that background check on the Sterling family. The one you asked for yesterday. I straightened up. And Edward Sterling isn't Edward Sterling. His real name is Edward Kozlov. He was indicted for wire fraud in 2008 in Ohio. Fled before trial. There's still an active warrant. I said nothing. Just listened. Christine Sterling. That's not her name either. Christina Volkov. She was arrested for identity theft in 2011 in Michigan. Served 18 months. Got out, changed her name, moved to Pennsylvania. And Gabriella? Michael hesitated. Gabriella Sterling has been married twice before. Both times the marriages ended within a year. Both times she walked away with substantial settlements. One was a car dealership owner in Pittsburgh. The other was a real estate developer in Harrisburg. They're a family operation, Tom. A scam family. They target older men with assets. They use Gabriella as the lure and Brandon's the access point. He knows. I don't think so, Michael said carefully. From what I can tell, Brandon's listed as a junior partner in one of Edward's Shell LLC's Sterling development. But I doubt he understands what that means. I think they groomed him. Made him think he was getting in on a legitimate investment opportunity. Used him to get close to you. I closed my eyes, leaned my head back against the truck. The medication had stopped the chest pain, but there was a different kind of pain now. A deeper one. My son wasn't just a thief. He was a mark, a tool, a useful idiot in a con job targeting me. Tom. Michael's voice pulled me back. You still there? Yeah. I contacted the DA's office. They're looping in the FBI. This is organized fraud. Interstate. They want to move on it today, at the wedding. Catch everyone in one place. The wedding's at 2, I said. I know. They're coordinating now. But Tom, they need you to confirm something. The venue, the Colonial Manor. Who paid for it? I did. $95,000. I disputed the charge yesterday. Right. So legally, who owns the event space today? Who has the right to be there? I opened my eyes, stared at the house on Birch Lane, at the life my son had built on lies and stolen money. I do, I said. The payment's in my name. The contract's in my name. I own that space today. That's what I thought, Michael said. The FBI wants you there, not as the father of the groom, as the person with legal authority over the venue. They're going to move in during the ceremony. Arrest Edward, Christine, and Gabriella on the outstanding warrants. Question Brandon. But they need you there to authorize access. I thought about it. Thought about walking into that venue. Watching my son stand at an altar. He didn't pay for marrying a woman who'd targeted him like prey. Watching the FBI move in. Watching it all collapse in front of everyone he'd invited. I'll be there, I said. Tom, I'll be there, but I need to go home first. Why? I looked down at my work clothes, the Carhartt jacket with the paint stains, the jeans with the hole in the knee, the boots caked with mud. The outfit Gabriella had called blue collar and embarrassing. Because if I'm going to destroy my son's wedding, I said I'm going to look good doing it. I hung up, pocketed the nitroglycerin, got into the truck, started the engine. The Colonial Manor was 40 minutes away. But first I had to go home, had to shower, had to iron the suit I'd been planning to wear as father of the groom, had to polish the Florsheims one more time, because I wasn't going as a father anymore. I was going as the man who owned the building, the man who'd paid for every flower, every chair, every piece of silverware they'd be using to celebrate a marriage built on fraud. And when the FBI walked through those doors, I'd be standing there in my best suit, watching everything I'd worked for, everything Eleanor and I had built, finally be avenged. The drive from Levittown to Center City, Philadelphia, takes 40 minutes. I'd made it 1,000 times over the years, to job sites, to supply yards, to the hospital when Eleanor was sick, always in the same truck, a Ford F-150 with a dented tailgate and 200,000 miles on the odometer. Today it felt like driving to an execution. Mine or theirs, I wasn't sure yet. I took Route 1 south, past the strip malls and gas stations, past the construction sites where crews were framing up new housing developments, the same kind of work I'd done for 4 decades. I slowed down at one site, watched a young guy on a ladder, nail gun in hand, building a wall board by board. I used to be that guy. Used to come home with sawdust in my hair and splinters in my palms. Used to feel proud of the buildings I'd helped create, the houses families would live in, the structures that would outlast me. Somewhere along the way, I'd raised a son who thought that kind of work was beneath him. A son who looked at my calloused hands and felt embarrassed instead of grateful. A son who'd stolen from me to impress a woman who called me the help. I'd built so much, and somehow I'd built a monster. The truck merged onto I-95. The city skyline came into view. Glass towers reflecting the afternoon sun, the Schuylkill River winding through it all like a silver ribbon. Philadelphia, the city where I'd worked my first construction job at 17. The city where I'd met Eleanor at a diner on Broad Street. The city where Brandon had been born 31 years ago in Jefferson Hospital. It all felt very far away now. The Colonial Manor sat on the edge of Rittenhouse Square, one of those old money neighborhoods where the townhouses cost millions and the residents had lawyers on speed dial. The venue itself was a restored 19th century mansion. White columns, brick facade, iron gates, manicured gardens, The kind of place where senators got married and CEOs celebrated anniversaries. The kind of place I'd never been invited to until I was paying for it. I pulled up at 1:45 p.m., 15 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to start. The circular driveway was packed with luxury cars, Mercedes, BMWs, a Lexus, a Tesla, all of them gleaming and perfect, parked in neat rows along the curved stone path. I drove my truck right up onto the red carpet, not beside it, on it. The front tires rolled over the plush fabric with a satisfying crunch. I stopped directly in front of the main entrance, blocking the path for anyone trying to get in or out. A kid in a burgundy vest came running over. Valet. Couldn't have been more than 20. His name tag said Ethan. "Sir, you can't park here." I got out of the truck. The suit felt strange after a morning in work clothes. Stiffer, more formal. But it fit well. Eleanor had helped me pick it out 10 years ago. Navy blue, single-breasted. Nothing flashy, just clean and respectable. I looked at Ethan. He looked at my truck, then at me, then at the truck again. Confusion spread across his face. "Sir," he said again, "this is the red carpet entrance. Vendors and deliveries use the service entrance around back." I pulled out my wallet, took out a $100 bill, held it between two fingers. "The truck stays here," I said. Ethan stared at the money. I can't." Mr. Stone said. "If Gregory Stone asks," I said, "tell him Thomas Reynolds gave you permission." I handed him the bill. He took it, looked at it, looked at me, nodded slowly. "Yes, sir." I walked past him up the stone steps to the entrance. The double doors were propped open. Inside I could hear music, string quartet, something classical, Pachelbel maybe. Canon in D, the wedding march. A man in a black suit stepped in front of me before I could enter. Security, built like a linebacker with a shaved head and an earpiece curling down behind his collar. His name tag said Trevor Williams. "Invitation," he said. "Don't have one." His eyes narrowed. "Then I'm afraid you can't come in, sir. I need to speak with Gregory Stone. Mr. Stone is busy coordinating the ceremony. If you'd like to leave a message." "It's not a request." Trevor's hand moved to his hip. Not aggressive, just ready. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step back. The groom specifically mentioned that his father might try to attend uninvited. He said you've been unstable, that you might cause trouble." Something cold settled in my chest. Brandon had warned them about me, told them I was crazy, told them to keep me out. "Call Gregory Stone," I said. My voice was flat. Calm. The kind of calm that comes right before a storm. "Now." Trevor hesitated, looked me up and down, saw the suit, saw the Florsheims, saw a 64-year-old man standing alone in a doorway, asking, not demanding, not threatening, just asking to speak to the venue manager. He touched his earpiece. "Stone, we have a situation at the main entrance. Man claiming he needs to speak with you. Says his name is..." He looked at me. "Thomas Reynolds." Trevor repeated it, listened. His expression shifted. Just slightly. Confusion. Maybe concern. "Copy that," he said. He lowered his hand from the earpiece and looked at me differently now. "He's on his way." We stood there in silence. Behind Trevor, I could see the grand hall. White chairs arranged in perfect rows. Flower arrangements on pedestals. Candles flickering. Guests in formal wear murmuring to each other, checking their watches. The altar at the far end, draped in silk, waiting. Everything I'd paid for. Everything Brandon had stolen from me to make possible. The door behind Trevor opened. Gregory Stone stepped through, and when he saw me, every drop of color drained from his face. Gregory Stone wasn't just the manager of the Colonial Manor. He was my employee, and he'd forgotten who signed his paychecks. Chairman Reynolds, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The color still hadn't returned to his face. I didn't know you'd be attending today. Trevor looked from Gregory to me, confusion spreading across his features. Chairman Gregory, I said. My voice was calm, even. The way you'd talk to someone during a business meeting. Status update on the venue payment. He swallowed. The wire transfer for $95,000 was disputed yesterday evening. The bank froze the transaction pending investigation. We haven't received payment. That's correct, I said. I filed the dispute. But sir, the ceremony is about to start. The groom's party is here. The guests are my guests, I said. Or they would be if I'd been invited. But since I wasn't, I decided not to pay for the privilege of hosting a party I'm banned from. Gregory's mouth opened, closed. He looked like a man trying to do math that didn't add up. Trevor stepped forward. Wait, you're saying you own Reynolds Property Holdings? I said. We acquired the Colonial Manor 18 months ago. Gregory manages the day-to-day operations. I'm the controlling shareholder, which means, Trevor, that I don't need an invitation to enter a building I own. Trevor's hand fell away from his hip. He looked at Gregory. Gregory nodded, barely perceptible. Mr. Reynolds is the principal owner, Gregory confirmed quietly. He has full authority over the property. The silence stretched out. From inside the ballroom, I could hear the string quartet finishing Pachelbel. A voice over a microphone, probably the officiant, asking guests to please take their seats. The ceremony was about to begin. Here's what's going to happen, I said. The wedding proceeds as planned. You let the guests gather. You let Brandon and Gabriella walk down that aisle. You let them stand at the altar and pretend everything is fine. Gregory's eyes widened. Sir. And when they're all in place, I continued. When everyone is watching, when the ceremony is about to begin, you're going to give me the microphone, because I have a few things I'd like to say. Mr. Reynolds, with all due respect, this is highly irregular. Gregory, I said, and there was steel in my voice now. I pay you $68,000 a year to manage this property. I pay for the staff. I pay for the maintenance. I pay for the insurance. I pay for everything. So when I tell you, I want to make a speech at a wedding being held in a venue I own paid for with money I provided for a son who stole from me and then told me I wasn't good enough to attend, you don't get to tell me it's irregular. He stared at me. Then slowly he nodded. Yes, sir. Good. I looked past him through the open door toward the management office at the end of the hall. I could see movement inside. Figures in suits, not wedding guests, law enforcement. Are our other guests here? Gregory followed my gaze, understood. They arrived 20 minutes ago. Back entrance as you arranged. They're waiting in my office. Tell them to stay there until I give the signal. What signal? They'll know it when they see it. I walked past Gregory and Trevor through the doorway into the grand foyer of the Colonial Manor. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, oil paintings in gilded frames, a sweeping staircase that curved up to the second floor. Wealth and prestige oozing from every corner. I'd bought this place because it was a good investment. Historic property, prime location, Steady bookings from Philadelphia's elite. Eleanor had loved it. She'd said it reminded her of the kind of place she used to dream about as a girl. The kind of place where important things happened, where memories were made. She would have hated what I was about to do here, but she would have understood why. The ballroom doors were closed. I could hear muffled sounds from inside. The rustling of fabric, the scrape of chairs, voices lowering to whispers as the ceremony prepared to start. I moved to the side, positioning myself in the shadows by the staircase. From here I had a clear view of the doors, but wouldn't be seen by anyone entering or exiting. Gregory appeared beside me. "Sir, the officiant is about to begin. The bridal party is lining up. I can interrupt if you want." "No," I said. "Let them start. Let Brandon stand up there. Let Gabriella walk down the aisle. Let them think for just a few minutes that they're going to get what they want. And then we see who really paid for this wedding." Gregory hesitated, then nodded and disappeared back toward the management office. Trevor remained by the entrance, standing at attention, but his eyes kept darting to me. He didn't understand what was happening. Not yet. None of them did. The ballroom doors opened briefly. A groomsman slipped out, adjusted his boutonniere, slipped back inside. Through the gap, I caught a glimpse of the altar. White silk, roses, candles, and Brandon standing there in a tuxedo I probably paid for waiting for his bride. The doors closed. The music changed. Wagner. Bridal chorus. Here comes the bride. I waited. Inside that ballroom, 200 guests were watching Gabriella Sterling walk down an aisle lined with flowers I'd paid for toward an altar I'd paid for, to marry my son in a ceremony I'd been told I was too embarrassing to attend. They were laughing, drinking champagne, admiring the decorations, congratulating themselves on being part of such an elegant, exclusive event. They had no idea what was about to happen. They had no idea that in less than 5 minutes, everything was going to come crashing down, and I was going to be the one holding the sledgehammer. I stood in the shadows at the back of the ballroom. The room was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers, white silk draped from the ceiling, 200 guests in formal attire seated in neat rows, all facing the altar at the front. And it was mine. Every square foot of it. The flowers alone must have cost a fortune. Orchids, the expensive kind, flown in from somewhere tropical, arranged in towering displays along the aisle and flanking the altar. I could see Gabriella's dress from here, even from the back of the room. White lace beaded bodice, a train that must have been 10 feet long. Custom alterations. Hand-stitched details. All of it paid for with Eleanor's jewelry. The pearl necklace, the gold locket, the diamond earrings. $1,450 worth of my wife's treasures melted down and turned into this spectacle. At the altar, the officiant had stepped aside. Gabriella was holding the microphone now. She was crying, or pretending to cry. Her voice wavered, thick with emotion. "Before we begin," she said, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, "Brandon and I want to address something painful. Something we've been struggling with privately, but feel you all deserve to know." The guests leaned forward. 200 people holding their breath, waiting for the revelation. Brandon's father, Gabriella continued, her voice breaking, is struggling with serious mental health issues. Over the past few months, his behavior has become increasingly erratic, paranoid. He's made accusations, threatened people. He's become dangerous. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Gasps, whispers. Brandon stood beside her, his head bowed, his hand over his face, the picture of a suffering son. A man torn between love for his father and concern for his safety. He was good. I had to give him that. He looked genuinely devastated. We tried to help him, Gabriella said. We tried to get him the care he needs, but he refused. And this morning, her voice cracked. She paused, composed herself. This morning, he threatened us. He took Brandon's car. He locked us out of our home. He's trying to sabotage our wedding because he can't accept that Brandon has moved on with his life. More whispers, heads shaking, sympathy pooling in the room like floodwater. For everyone's safety, Gabriella said, we made the difficult decision to ask him not to attend today. It broke our hearts, but we couldn't risk him hurting someone. She lowered the microphone, buried her face in Brandon's shoulder. He wrapped his arms around her, playing the role of protective fiancé. The guests clapped, softly at first, then louder. Applause for their bravery, their strength, their willingness to protect their loved ones from a dangerous, unstable man. I stood there in the shadows and watched my son sell me out to a room full of strangers. Watched him let his fiancée paint me as a lunatic, a threat, a man so broken that his own son had to lock him out of his life for the safety of others. And the worst part, they believed it. Every single person in that room believed it. They looked at Brandon and Gabriella with pity and admiration. They whispered about how hard it must be, how strong they were, how tragic it was that mental illness could tear a family apart. Nobody asked questions. Nobody wondered if there might be another side to the story. They just accepted it. Because Gabriella was beautiful and tearful, and Brandon looked heartbroken, and the story fit neatly into the narrative they wanted: a tragic father, a devoted son, a wedding saved, despite the odds. I stepped forward. My floor chimes hit the marble floor with a sharp, deliberate click, then another, and another. The sound cut through the room like a knife. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. 200 pairs of eyes found me in the shadows at the back of the ballroom. A man in a charcoal gray suit walking down the center aisle with his hands in his pockets and his head held high. The whispers started immediately. Who is that? Did someone let him in? Is that... Oh my God, that's... Gabriella saw me. Her face went white. The handkerchief dropped from her hand. Brandon turned. His mouth fell open. For a second, just a second, I saw raw panic in his eyes. Then he recovered, forced his expression into something neutral. But the damage was done. I'd seen it. The officiant stepped forward, confused. Sir, this is a private ceremony. I didn't stop, didn't slow down, just kept walking, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The guests were frozen. Some half stood from their seats, unsure whether to intervene or retreat. Others just stared, their champagne glasses forgotten in their hands. Gregory Stone appeared from the side entrance, saw me walking toward the altar, and started to move forward, then stopped. Remembered who owned the building, who paid his salary, who had authority here. He stepped back. Let me pass. I walked past the rows of guests, past the orchids and the candles and the silk ribbons, past the faces of people who'd just been told I was dangerous and unstable and not to be trusted. And I didn't stop. Not when Gabriella backed away from the altar, her hand clutching Brandon's arm. Not when Brandon said, "Dad, please." Not when the officiant tried to block my path. I just kept walking. Up the 3 steps to the altar, across the stage, until I was standing at the microphone right where Gabriella had been 60 seconds ago. Everyone in that room was looking at me. The dangerous father, the mentally unstable man, the person who wasn't supposed to be here. But I was here, and I wasn't leaving. Not until they heard the truth. I climbed the 3 steps to the stage. Gabriella backed away from me like I was the Grim Reaper come to collect a debt. Maybe I was. She fumbled for her phone, her hands shaking. I'm calling security. Security works for me, Gabriella, I said. My voice was calm, even, like we were discussing the weather. Just like the caterers, and the florist, and the man who tuned the piano you didn't pay for. I reached out. She stared at my hand. The calloused, scarred hand of a man who'd spent 40 years swinging hammers. And something in her face crumpled. She handed me the microphone without another word. I brought it to my lips, tapped it twice with my finger. Thump. Thump. The sound echoed through the ballroom's speakers, sharp and final as a judge's gavel. 200 faces stared at me, some confused, some horrified, some already reaching for their phones, probably texting each other, wondering what the hell was happening and whether they should leave. "Good afternoon," I said. My voice filled the room, amplified and clear. "I apologize for the interruption. I know you were enjoying yourselves. The wine is excellent, by the way. I should know. I picked it out myself when I approved the catering contract 3 weeks ago." Silence. Dead, heavy silence. "My name is Thomas Reynolds," I continued. "I'm Brandon's father, the one you just heard about. The mentally unstable one. The dangerous one. The one who had to be kept away for everyone's safety." I paused. Let that sink in. "I want to address that, if I may, because I think there's been a misunderstanding." I looked directly at Gabriella. She'd moved to Brandon's side now, gripping his arm like a life preserver. "I'm not mentally ill. I'm not dangerous. I don't pose a threat to anyone in this room." Another pause. "Unless, of course, you consider the truth to be a weapon, in which case, yes. I suppose I'm armed." A nervous laugh from someone in the back row, quickly stifled. I pulled my phone from my jacket pocket, held it up so the guests could see the screen, even though they were too far away to read it. "Yesterday evening," I said, "I received a text message from my son, Brandon, the groom. Would you like to hear what it said?" Nobody answered, but nobody looked away either. I read it aloud, slowly, clearly. Every word enunciated. "Dad, don't come to the wedding tomorrow. Gabriella says your blue-collar vibe would embarrass her family. We'll send you pictures." Gasps. Actual audible gasps. Heads turned toward Brandon, toward Gabriella, toward each other. I lowered the phone. "Blue-collar vibe," I repeated. That's what he said. Not "Dad, we want a small wedding." Not "Dad, we're trying to keep the guest list down." Blue-collar vibe. Because apparently, after everything I did for him, the way I earned my living was too embarrassing for his new in-laws to witness. I held up my hands. Both of them, palms out so everyone could see, the calluses, the scars, the bent pinky finger that never healed right after I broke it on a job site 20 years ago. These hands, I said, built houses for 40 years. Mixed concrete, framed walls, installed roofs. Worked 60-hour weeks in the summer heat and the winter cold. These hands put food on the table, paid for private school, paid for college, paid for graduate school, paid for the BMW my son drove, and the apartment he lives in, lived in. I lowered my hands, looked out at the audience, at the 200 people in their designer suits and cocktail dresses holding their champagne glasses sitting in chairs I'd paid for. "I did that work proudly," I said. "I never asked for thanks, never expected recognition. I did it because that's what fathers do. We sacrifice, we provide, we build futures for our children, even when it means we don't get to enjoy much of a future ourselves." Brandon was staring at the floor now. His face was red. I couldn't tell if it was shame or anger, maybe both. But somewhere along the way, I continued. My son learned to be ashamed of me, learned to see the work I did, honest, hard, physical work, as something beneath him, something to hide from his fiancée's aristocratic family. I let the word aristocratic hang in the air, let it simmer. "And you know what?" I said. "That hurt. It hurt more than 40 years of torn muscles and broken bones. It hurt more than losing my wife 5 years ago. It hurt because I realized I'd failed. Not as a provider, not as a worker, but as a father. Because I'd raised a son who measured a man's worth by the softness of his hands instead of the strength of his character." The ballroom was so quiet I could hear someone's watch ticking. I took a breath, steadied myself. This was the moment, the pivot point, the place where hurt turned into revelation. "But here's the interesting part," I said, and my voice dropped lower, colder, sharper. "Here's what you need to know. Here's the truth that nobody in this room has been told." I looked at Brandon, then at Gabriella, then back at the audience. Though I wasn't good enough to attend this wedding, I gestured around the ballroom at the flowers and the candles and the silk and the chandeliers. I was apparently good enough to pay for it. If you're still watching, drop a comment with your prediction. What do you think happens next? I want to hear your thoughts. Quick note, this story blends real emotions with fictional elements for impact. Some details are dramatized. If that's not your preference, feel free to pause here. But if you're ready to see how this unfolds, stay with me. I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper, unfolded it slowly, deliberately, letting the sound of creasing paper fill the silence. "This," I said, holding it up, "is a bank statement. Wire transfer confirmation to be specific. Dated 2 days ago. $95,000 paid to the Colonial Manor for venue rental, catering, floral arrangements, and entertainment." I looked around the room, at the ice sculptures melting slowly on the buffet tables, at the string quartet in the corner, their instruments resting silent in their laps, at the tower of champagne glasses stacked in a pyramid by the bar. "That lobster you had for the cocktail hour," I said. "I paid for it. Those white orchids lining the aisle, I picked them out. That band that played while you sipped your drinks and congratulated yourselves on being invited to such an elegant affair, I hired them." I paused. Let them absorb it. "But here's the thing," I continued, my voice dropping lower. "I didn't just pay for this floor. I don't just rent this space, I own it." Confusion rippled through the crowd. Whispers, heads turning. "Gregory!" I called out. He was standing by the side entrance, pale as a ghost. "Would you mind confirming for our guests who owns the Colonial Manor?" He swallowed, stepped forward. His voice was barely audible. "Reynolds Property Holdings," he said. "Mr. Thomas Reynolds is the principal shareholder." "Louder, please," I said. He cleared his throat. "Thomas Reynolds owns this building." The whispers turned into murmurs. The murmurs turned into shocked exclamations. I watched it spread through the room like wildfire. The realization, the reversal, the man in the work boots and the calloused hands. The one they'd been told was mentally unstable. The one Gabriella had painted as too embarrassing to invite. That man owned the mansion they were sitting in. 40 years of blue-collar work, I said. Turns out it pays pretty well if you're smart about it. If you save. If you invest. If you don't waste your money on things you can't afford just to impress people you don't like. I let that sink in. Then I pulled out another piece of paper. "But let's talk about the real reason I'm here," I said. My voice hardened. "Let's talk about theft." Brandon's face went white. Gabriella gripped his arm tighter. 12 weeks ago, I said, someone used my debit card to wire transfer $200,000 from my personal account to a shell corporation called Sterling Development LLC. I held up the second paper. Bank transaction record, Account numbers, routing numbers, all of it documented, official, undeniable. I didn't authorize that transfer, I said. I didn't even know about it until last week, because the person who took my card, the person who had access to my house, my wallet, my PIN number, was someone I trusted. Someone I'd given a key to. Someone who knew where I kept my things. I looked directly at Brandon. My son, I said. Brandon's mouth opened. No sound came out. $200,000, I repeated. Stolen, not borrowed, not asked for. Stolen. And do you know what he did with it? What they did with it? I gestured toward Gabriella, then toward the empty seats where Edward and Christine Sterling were supposed to be sitting. The parents who hadn't shown up. The parents who were probably at this very moment sitting in a Philadelphia airport wondering why their limousine never arrived. That money went to Edward Sterling, or Edward Kozlov, depending on which identity he's using this week. A man with an active warrant for wire fraud in Ohio. A man who's been running investment scams for the better part of 2 decades. Gasps. Real ones this time. Not polite surprise. Genuine shock. But that's not the worst part, I said. My voice cracked, just slightly. The first time since I'd taken the stage. That's not what keeps me up at night. I reached into my pocket one more time, pulled out the pink pawn receipt. It was wrinkled, now stained with coffee, but the numbers were still clear. 5 weeks ago, I said, my son broke into the house on Birch Lane. The house I own. The house I let him live in rent-free for 8 months. He went into the bedroom, opened the jewelry box that belonged to my wife. His mother, Eleanor Reynolds, who died 5 years ago from cancer. My voice was shaking now. I couldn't stop it. He took her pearl necklace, the one she wore on our wedding day. He took the gold locket with his baby picture inside, the one she opened every morning to look at his face. He took the diamond earrings I saved 6 months to buy her for our 25th anniversary. I held up the receipt. And he sold them, all of it. 3 paintings she spent years creating, every piece of jewelry she owned. Sold them to a pawn shop for $1,450. The silence was absolute. Not a cough, not a whisper. Not even the sound of breathing. To $1,450, I said again. That's what Eleanor Reynolds' legacy was worth to her son. And do you know what he did with that money? I looked at the flowers, at Gabriella's dress, at the wedding that should never have happened. He bought flowers, I said. He paid for alterations on a wedding dress. He turned his mother's treasures into decorations for a party celebrating the woman who told him his father was too low class to attend. I folded the receipt, put it back in my pocket. And so no, I said, my voice steady again, cold and final. I'm not mentally ill. I'm not dangerous. I'm not having some kind of breakdown. I looked out at the 200 guests, at their horrified faces, at their hands frozen on champagne glasses they'd suddenly forgotten they were holding. I'm just a father, I said, who got tired of paying for the privilege of being disrespected, who got tired of watching his son sell his mother's memory for pocket change, who got tired of being told he wasn't good enough, while the bill for good enough kept landing on his desk. I paused. One last time. And I brought someone with me, I said quietly, to make sure justice gets served. I looked toward the management office, nodded. The double doors at the far end of the ballroom burst open. Not opened, burst, like someone had kicked them off their hinges. 6 men in dark suits poured through. FBI badges already out held high. Behind them, uniformed Philadelphia police officers, hands on their holsters, faces hard and professional. FBI. The voice cut through the ballroom like a gunshot. "Nobody move!" The guests froze. Some half stood from their chairs. Others dropped their champagne glasses. The crystal shattered on the marble floor, the sound sharp and final. Special Agent Robert Martinez stepped forward, mid-40s, buzz cut. The kind of face that had seen too much and stopped being surprised by anything. He moved like a man who'd done this 100 times before. Direct, efficient, no wasted motion. "Brandon Reynolds," he said, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "You're under arrest for grand larceny and wire fraud." Brandon's face went from white to gray. His mouth opened. No words came out. 2 agents moved toward the altar. Brandon backed away, his hands raised, shaking his head. "No, wait. This is Gabriella Sterling." Martinez continued. "You're under arrest as an accomplice to fraud and conspiracy to commit theft." Gabriella's face twisted. Something broke behind her eyes. All the composure, all the elegance, all the carefully maintained performance, gone. Just raw animal panic. "You son of a bitch!" she screamed. "Not at the FBI, at me." She lunged, came at me across the stage like a rabid dog nail's extended face contorted with rage. For a second I thought she might actually reach me, thought I might have to defend myself against a bride in a $10,000 dress. But Trevor Williams was faster. He intercepted her mid-lunge, wrapped his arms around her waist, and slammed her down onto the stage. She thrashed, screamed, tried to claw at his face. He held her easily, professionally, waiting for the officers to reach him. "Get off me!" she shrieked. "Do you know who I am? Do you know who my father is?" "Yeah," one of the officers said, snapping handcuffs onto her wrists. "We know exactly who your father is." Brandon was running, or trying to. He'd jumped off the stage, was stumbling through the rows of chairs, shoving guests aside, heading for the side exit. His tuxedo jacket flapped behind him. His face was streaked with tears. "Dad!" he screamed. "Dad, help me, please!" Trevor let go of Gabriella. The officers had her now, and moved. Fast. Tackled Brandon 3 rows from the door. They went down hard. Brandon's face hitting the marble with a crack that made me wince. Trevor pinned him, one knee in his back, waiting for the police. Brandon was sobbing. Not crying. Sobbing. Full body heaves, snot running from his nose, words coming out in broken gasps. "Dad, please. I'm sorry. Please don't let them. Dad." I walked to the edge of the stage, looked down at my son, at the boy I'd raised, the man I'd sacrificed everything for, lying face down on the floor of a mansion I owned, begging me to save him from the consequences of stealing from me. "I love you," I said. My voice was quiet, calm. "I've always loved you, but your mother was right. I loved you too much. I protected you from every hard lesson. I caught you every time you fell." I paused. Let him hear it. "But not this time," I said. "This time I love you enough to let you fall." Brandon's sobs got louder. Officers pulled him to his feet, snapped handcuffs around his wrists. He didn't resist, just stood there, shoulders shaking, face destroyed. Martinez was moving through the crowd, now heading toward the back entrance. 2 more agents flanked him. "Just Edward Kozlov and Christina Volkov," he said into his radio. "Apprehended at Philadelphia International Airport approximately 40 minutes ago. Currently in custody en route to federal holding." He looked at me, nodded once. Confirmation. The Sterling parents. Gabriella's aristocratic, wealthy, cultured parents. Arrested at the airport while waiting for a limousine that would never come. 18 months the FBI had been building a case against them. 18 months of tracking their shell companies, their fake identities, their pattern of targeting older men with assets. And now it was over. "Ladies and gentlemen," Martinez said, addressing the room, "we're going to need statements from everyone here. Nobody leaves until we've taken names and contact information. Please remain calm and cooperate with the officers." The ballroom erupted. Voices, shouting, phones coming out. People calling lawyers, calling friends, calling anyone who might explain what the hell was happening. I picked up the microphone one more time, tapped it. The sound cut through the chaos. "Just so we're clear," I said, my voice amplified and steady, "the wedding is canceled." Silence. 200 people staring at me. "But," I continued, "the bar is still open, and I'm buying." I set the microphone down on the altar. Not dropped, not thrown. Just set it down gently, deliberately. Then I walked off the stage, past Gabriella still screaming obscenities at anyone within earshot, past Brandon being led toward the doors in handcuffs, his face buried in his hands, past the guests, their expensive clothes and shocked faces blurring together into a single mass of confusion and horror. Gregory Stone stood by the entrance. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in the last hour. "Send me the bill for cleanup," I said as I passed him, "and take the rest of the day off. You've earned it." He nodded, said nothing. What was there to say? I walked through the foyer, past the crystal chandeliers and the oil paintings and the marble staircase, past the reporters who'd somehow already gathered outside cameras, flashing microphones, thrust forward voices shouting questions I had no intention of answering. "Mr. Reynolds, can you comment?" "Sir, did you know about the fraud?" "Is it true you own?" I pushed through them, kept walking. Out the front doors, down the stone steps, onto the circular driveway where my F-150 still sat on the red carpet exactly where I'd left it. The afternoon sun was bright, warm, the kind of late spring day Eleanor used to love. Not too hot, not too cold. Perfect. Behind me, I could hear sirens, more police arriving. Gabriella still screaming from inside the building, the click and whir of camera shutters, the chaos I'd created or revealed depending on how you looked at it. I didn't look back. I got into my truck, started the engine, pulled away from the colonial manor, leaving the red carpet crushed and dirty beneath my tires. I had one more thing to do. If you've stayed through all of that, I appreciate you. Let me know in the comments, what would you do in Thomas's position right now? A reminder, this narrative combines authentic themes with creative storytelling. Some elements are fictionalized for depth. If you've made it this far, the message likely resonates. But if not, no pressure to continue. 3 days after the arrests, my phone rang at 7 in the morning. I was sitting at the kitchen table. Same table where I'd read Brandon's text message. Same table where Eleanor used to make grocery lists and pay bills and fold laundry while I drank coffee and told her about my day. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you hear your own heartbeat. "Mr. Reynolds." The voice on the other end was professional. Female. "This is Philadelphia County Detention Center. We have an inmate here requesting a visit. Brandon Reynolds. He's listed you as next of kin." I said nothing. Just held the phone and listened to the hum of the refrigerator in the corner. "Mr. Reynolds. Are you there?" "I'm here. Would you like to schedule a visit?" I looked around the kitchen, at Eleanor's ceramic rooster, at the coffee maker still dripping, at my hands resting on the table, the same calloused, scarred hands I'd held up in front of 200 people 3 days ago. "Yes," I said. "Today." "What time?" She gave me the details, visiting hours, what I could and couldn't bring, the security procedures. I wrote it down on the back of an envelope even though I knew I'd remember every word. When I hung up, I sat there for another 20 minutes. Just sat, staring at nothing. Part of me wanted to go, wanted to see my son, wanted to hold him and tell him it would be okay and that I'd hire the best lawyer money could buy and we'd figure this out together. Because that's what fathers do. We protect, we fix, we save. But another part of me, the part that had been listening to Eleanor's voice for 3 days straight, that part said no. Let him face the consequences. That's what she'd told me, on her deathbed, when she knew she was dying and I was the only one left to raise Brandon. She'd made me promise, and I'd refused. I'd kept catching him, kept bailing him out, kept smoothing over his mistakes until he didn't know how to stand on his own. And look where that got us. I stood up, poured the rest of my coffee down the sink, went upstairs and changed into clean clothes. Nothing fancy, just jeans and a button-down shirt. The same kind of outfit I'd worn to 1,000 job sites over 40 years. The drive to the detention center took 30 minutes. I knew the area. I'd helped build a housing development 6 blocks away back in 2003. The neighborhood had changed since then. More chain stores, more traffic, more people who didn't know each other's names. The detention center was a gray concrete building surrounded by chain-link fence topped with razor wire, guard towers at each corner, security cameras everywhere. The kind of place designed to make you feel small and watched and reminded that bad things happen to people who break the law. I parked in the visitor's lot, got out, walked to the entrance. The security process took 20 minutes. Empty your pockets. Walk through the metal detector. Hand over your ID. Sign in. Get your visitor badge. Wait while they confirm your clearance. No phones, no wallets, no keys. Nothing that could be used as a weapon or passed to an inmate. They led me through 3 sets of locked doors. Each one clanged shut behind me with a sound like finality, like crossing a threshold you can't uncross. The visitation room was small and sterile, white walls, fluorescent lights. A row of plastic chairs bolted to the floor, each facing a thick plexiglass partition. On the other side of the glass, more chairs, and between them, phones, old-fashioned handsets, the kind attached to the wall with metal cords. I sat down in the 3rd chair from the end. The plastic was hard and cold. The room smelled like disinfectant and despair. A door on the other side of the glass opened. Brandon walked in. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit. Standard issue. The color of traffic cones and construction vests. The color of visibility of warning of someone the system has decided needs to be marked and monitored. He looked smaller than I remembered. Thinner. His face was pale and drawn stubble covering his jaw because they only let you shave twice a week. His hair was dirty. His eyes were hollow. That's the only word for it. Hollow. Like someone had reached inside and scooped out everything that made him Brandon and left just a shell walking around pretending to be my son. 3 days. That's all it had been. 72 hours since he'd stood at that altar, in a custom tuxedo surrounded by flowers and champagne and 200 people pretending to celebrate his future. Now he looked like he'd aged 10 years. He walked to the chair across from me, sat down slowly like his body hurt, like prison had already taught him to move carefully, to take up as little space as possible to not attract attention. He looked at me through the glass. I looked at him. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then he reached for the phone on his side of the partition. His hand was shaking, and I reached for mine. For 5 seconds, we just looked at each other through the glass. Father and son. separated by more than bulletproof plexiglass, separated by theft and lies and choices that couldn't be undone. Brandon's voice came through the phone, tinny and hollow. Dad. Just that one word. Dad. The way he used to say it when he was 7 years old and needed help with his homework, or when he was 12 and broke his arm falling off his bike, or when he was 16 and got caught drinking at a party and needed me to pick him up at the police station at 2 a.m. Dad, please fix this. Brandon, I said. Dad, you have to get me out of here. His voice cracked. Please, I can't. This place is Dad, please. Bail me out. Call your lawyer. I'll pay you back, I swear I'll listen. No. The word hit him like a slap. He blinked, stared at me. What? No, I said again. I'm not bailing you out, but I'm your son. You should have thought about that before you stole from me. His face crumpled. Dad, please, you don't understand. Gabriella, she, Edward, he, they manipulated me. They lied. They made it seem like the investment was legitimate, like it was a real opportunity. I didn't know they were. Stop. He stopped, mouth half open. But you were manipulated about the investment, I said. My voice was flat, calm, the way you'd explain something to a child who wasn't listening. Fine. I can accept that. Edward Sterling is a professional con man. He's been doing this for 20 years. So yes, he probably fooled you. Probably made you believe you were getting in on something real. Brandon nodded frantically. Yes, exactly. That's what I'm saying, I didn't. But I interrupted, taking my debit card. That wasn't Edward's idea. That was yours. He froze. Not breaking into my house, I continued, going into the bedroom where your mother's jewelry box was kept. Opening it, taking out her pearl necklace, her locket with your baby picture inside. Her diamond earrings, walking into a pawn shop and selling them for $1,450. My voice didn't rise, didn't shake, just stated facts. That wasn't Gabriella manipulating you, I said. That wasn't Edward deceiving you. That was you making choices, your choices. Brandon's eyes filled with tears. I know, Dad. I'm sorry, I was desperate. I thought if I could just get the money for the wedding, everything would work out, and then I'd be able to what, I said. To marry into money. To never have to work a real job, to live off your father-in-law's shell companies and pretend you were successful. He said nothing, just cried. I took a breath, forced myself to stay calm. This wasn't about anger anymore. This was about something harder. Do you know what my biggest mistake was? I asked. He looked up, wiped his eyes with his orange sleeve. My biggest mistake, I said, was making you weak. He flinched like I'd hit him. I made you weak by never letting you fail, by catching you every time you fell, by paying for everything you wanted and never making you earn anything, by protecting you from consequences until you didn't know how to face them. I paused. Let him hear it. Your mother knew, I said. Eleanor, she told me years ago. She said I was spoiling you. She said the world is cruel to weak men, and I was raising a weak man. I didn't listen. I thought love meant protection. I thought being a good father meant making sure you never struggled. Brandon's shoulders shook. He was sobbing now. Not crying. Sobbing. The kind of full-body grief that comes from realizing you've destroyed everything, and there's no one to blame but yourself. But I was wrong, I said. Love doesn't mean protection from consequences. Love means teaching you to face them. And I failed you. I failed Eleanor. I failed myself. I looked at him, at my son, at the man I'd raised to be helpless. "So here's what's going to happen," I said. My voice was steady, final. "You're going to cooperate with the FBI. You're going to tell them everything you know about Edward Sterling and his operation. You're going to plead guilty to the charges against you, and you're going to serve your time." Brandon's eyes went wide. "Dad, no, I can't. I'll be in here for years." "Probably," I said. 5 maybe, 10 if you fight it. 2 or 3 if you cooperate and show genuine remorse." "Dad." "And when you get out," I continued, cutting him off, "you're going to start over, from nothing, with your bare hands, the way I did, the way my father did. You're going to work. Real work. The kind that makes you sweat and ache and builds calluses on your palms. And you're going to earn your way back. Not because you deserve help, not because I owe you anything, but because that's what men do when they fall. They get up, and they rebuild." Brandon shook his head. "I can't. I don't know how." "Then you'll learn," I said. "Because you don't have a choice. This is the only path forward. Work hard. Serve your time. Face your consequences. And maybe," I paused, "maybe in 10 years, if you've become the kind of man your mother hoped you'd be, you can write me a letter. And we'll see." "See what?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Nah, see if there's anything left to save." Silence, heavy and complete. I stood up, set the phone back on its hook. Brandon panicked, grabbed his phone tighter, pressed his free hand flat against the glass fingers splayed wide. "Dad, wait. Please don't leave. I need you." I looked at his hand, at the glass between us, at the desperate, broken man on the other side who'd sold his mother's memory for wedding flowers. And I did not press my hand back. Brandon's face crumbled. "Dad, will you forgive me?" I looked at him, really looked at him, at the hollow eyes and the orange jumpsuit and the 3 days of stubble and the man who'd been my whole world for 31 years. "Ask me again in 10 years, I said. Then I turned around, and I walked away. Behind me I could hear him. Phone pressed to his ear, hand still on the glass, voice breaking. "Dad, Dad, please." "Dadu." I kept walking, through the visitation room, through the 3 locked doors that clanged shut behind me, each one severing the sound of his voice a little more, through security, through the lobby, out into the parking lot where the afternoon sun was warm and bright, and Eleanor would have loved the way the light hit the trees. I got into my truck, started the engine, drove away, and I didn't look back. 30 days can change everything. Or nothing. Depends on the person, Edward Sterling, or Edward Kozlov, depending on which identity the court chose to recognize. Received 18 years in federal prison. No parole. The judge called him a predator who has destroyed families for 2 decades and made sure the sentence reflected that. Christine Sterling, born Christina Volkov, got 12 years. She cried during sentencing, said she'd been forced into it by her husband. The prosecutor showed text messages where she'd bragged about hooking another fish. The judge wasn't impressed. Gabriella Sterling took a plea deal. 7 years. In exchange, she testified against her father in excruciating detail. Every scam, every mark, every shell company, and fake identity going back 15 years. The FBI said her testimony would help them close cases in 4 different states. I wondered if she'd done it out of genuine remorse or just self-preservation. Probably the latter. Brandon's sentencing was different. He stood in front of Judge Wilson, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and no tolerance for bullshit, and he did something I'd never seen him do before. He told the truth. No excuses. No blaming Gabriella or Edward or his upbringing or his grief over losing his mother. He stood there in a cheap suit Michael Crawford had helped him pick out, and he said, "I stole from my father. I betrayed him. I sold my mother's jewelry to pay for a wedding I couldn't afford. And I did it because I was selfish and weak and didn't want to face the fact that I'd built my life on lies." Michael told me later that the prosecutor had been ready to ask for 3 to 5 years. But after Brandon's statement, after he'd provided the FBI with every detail they needed to dismantle Edward's operation, after he'd agreed to restitution and community service and showed genuine remorse, Judge Wilson gave him 18 months. Suspended. Conditional on 500 hours of community service and full restitution to a charitable fund established in Eleanor's name. $201,450. Every penny he'd stolen. Every penny the pawn shop had given him for Eleanor's treasures. Paid back. With interest. To a fund that would help families affected by elder fraud. Eleanor would have liked that. Brandon was living in a studio apartment now. 1 room, kitchenette in the corner. Bathroom the size of a closet. Michael had sent me photos. Not because I'd asked, but because he thought I should know. The apartment was nearly empty. An air mattress on the floor. A folding table, a single chair, a microwave. That was it. No furniture, no TV, no BMW, no luxury. He was working construction. A crew building a new office complex in Northeast Philadelphia. 60 hours a week, $19 an hour. Grunt work, carrying lumber, mixing concrete, framing walls. The kind of work I'd done for 40 years. Michael said Brandon's hands were starting to callous. I didn't know how to feel about that. Part of me was proud. Proud that he was finally learning what real work meant. What it felt like to earn $1 through sweat instead of theft. But another part of me, the part that was still just a father, that part ached. Because I knew how hard that work was. I knew how your body hurt at the end of the day. I knew how you'd lie in bed at night too tired to move, wondering if this was all your life would ever be. And I knew Brandon had never had to feel that before. Until now. I was packing for Italy when the email came through. Subject line, "Thought you'd want to see this." From Michael Crawford, 1 attachment, a photo. I almost didn't open it. Almost deleted it. But something made me click. The photo was grainy, taken from across a street. Brandon standing outside a check-cashing place holding a piece of paper. His first paycheck. You could see it in his face. Not joy exactly. Not pride. Just exhaustion. And maybe something else. Something that might have been the beginning of understanding. At the bottom of the check, you could barely make out the deduction. Restitution. Eleanor Reynolds Fund, $347.82. I stared at that number for a long time. $347. Out of his first paycheck. He'd probably taken home less than $800 for 60 hours of backbreaking work. And he hadn't complained. Hadn't called me. Hadn't asked for help. He was facing it. On his own. I saved the photo. Didn't reply to Michael's email. Didn't call Brandon. Didn't reach out. Just saved it. Put it in a folder on my desktop labeled Maybe Someday. My suitcase was packed. 2 weeks in Italy, Amalfi Coast. Eleanor had always wanted to go. She'd kept a magazine clipping of the coastline on our refrigerator for years. Blue water, white buildings, lemon trees. She'd said, "When you retire, Thomas, we're going there. Just you and me." But I'd kept working, kept building, Kept saying next year, and we have time, and let's wait until Brandon's settled. And then she died. And the clipping stayed on the refrigerator, a dream that would never happen. But I was going now. For her. For me. For the life I'd spent 40 years postponing. I had one stop to make before the airport. I got into my truck, drove through Levittown, past the house that felt too big and too quiet, now past the Birch Lane property that I'd already listed for sale, past the Colonial Manor, where a wedding had collapsed and lives had changed forever. I drove to North Philadelphia, parked on a street I'd only been to once before. 30 days ago, the sign was still there. Faded red letters on a white background. Metropolitan Pawn Exchange. I turned off the engine, sat there for a moment. Then I got out and walked inside. Eugene Miller recognized me the moment I walked into Metropolitan Pawn Exchange. He'd seen the news, the wedding, the arrests. "The paintings are gone," he said quietly. "Sold the first week, but the jewelry..." He gave me a name, an address. 2 days and $6,000 later, I had Eleanor's locket and pearl necklace back. The earrings I'd bought from Eugene directly. I held them in my hands and cried. Not from sadness, from relief. I put them in a safe deposit box with a note to be given to Brandon Reynolds in 10 years. If he's earned them. The paintings were lost forever, but I could still see them in my mind. Eleanor's soul on canvas. Maybe that was enough. Philadelphia International Airport. First class for the first time in my life. Seat 1A to Rome. The TSA agent recognized me. The wedding video had gone viral. Millions of views. "Now you did the right thing, sir," he said quietly. I nodded, walked through. On the plane, they offered Dom Perignon, the same champagne served at Brandon's wedding, while I dismantled his life on stage. I took a glass, sipped it. It was better than I remembered. The plane took off. Philadelphia disappeared below. I thought about Brandon, about the photo Michael had sent, about the calluses forming on his hands, and the $800 he'd earned after taxes and restitution were deducted from 60 hours of work. That first paycheck was more important than every million I'd ever given him, because he'd earned it, with his own hands, his own sweat, his own choices. I'd spent 31 years giving Brandon everything. In doing so, I'd given him nothing. No strength, no understanding of what it meant to build something from nothing. I'd made him weak, then been angry when he acted weak, but now he was learning. For the first time learning what it meant to be a man, and I'd done that by letting him fall. My phone buzzed. I'd forgotten airplane mode. One message from Brandon. "Dad, I understand now. I'm sorry. I'm trying." I stared at it. Wanted to respond. Wanted to say I was proud. Wanted to tell him that maybe in 10 years we could talk. But I didn't. I switched to airplane mode, turned the phone off, flipped it face down. Not because I didn't care, but because he needed to do this alone, without my approval, without my validation. He needed to do it for himself. I closed my eyes. Somewhere over the Atlantic, I thought about Eleanor, about the magazine clipping on our refrigerator. The dream of sitting on a terrace overlooking the Mediterranean, eating pasta, drinking wine, watching the sunset. "We're going, Ellie," I whispered. "I know I'm 40 years late, but we're going." The plane climbed higher, into the clouds, into golden light. I wasn't abandoning my son. I was teaching him the most important lesson: you are responsible for your own life, your choices, your consequences, your redemption. "I loved you enough to let you fall, Brandon." The cabin lights dimmed. The sunset painted the clouds orange and pink, the kind Eleanor would have loved. For the first time in 31 years, maybe since she died, I felt free. We're flying, Ellie. Looking back at everything that happened, I realized this story isn't just about family betrayal. It's about how I created the conditions for that betrayal to occur. For 31 years, I thought being a good father meant catching Brandon every time he stumbled. I thought love meant protection. I thought sacrifice meant giving him everything I never had. I was wrong. Don't be like me. Don't love your children so much that you rob them of their strength. Don't confuse generosity with wisdom or comfort with compassion. Every time I bailed Brandon out, every time I paid his bills or smoothed over his mistakes or gave him money he hadn't earned, I was teaching him a terrible lesson that consequences were for other people. That responsibility was optional, that someone would always be there to save him. I made him weak, and then I was devastated when he acted weak. The hardest lesson I've learned is this: family betrayal cuts deepest when we've planted the seeds ourselves. Brandon didn't become selfish overnight. I cultivated that selfishness by never saying no, by never letting him fail, by protecting him from the very pain that would have taught him to be strong. Real love isn't comfortable. It doesn't always feel good. Sometimes real love means watching someone you die for struggle and suffer and fail and not intervening. Because God doesn't shield us from every consequence. He gives us free will and lets us face our choices so we learn, so we grow, so we become who we're meant to be. These grandpa stories we tell aren't just entertainment or nostalgia. They're warnings passed down through generations. My story is a warning: enable someone long enough, and eventually they'll mistake your kindness for weakness and your love for obligation. Family betrayal happens when gratitude dies and entitlement takes root. If you're raising children, grandchildren, or mentoring anyone, give them tools, not solutions. Give them opportunities to earn, not handouts. Give them the dignity of standing on their own 2 feet, even if they fall a few times first. Those calluses Brandon's developing on his hands, they're worth more than every dollar I ever gave him. These grandpa stories hurt to tell, but they're necessary, because sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go even when every instinct screams to hold on tighter. I'm grateful you walked alongside me through this difficult story. Now I want to hear from you. If your own child betrayed you this deeply, stole from you, sold your spouse's precious belongings, spat on your sacrifices, could you do what Thomas did? Or would your heart override your head? Leave your truth in the comments. No judgment, just conversation. If this hit differently for you, that subscribe button keeps you connected to future tales. Real talk. This story channels authentic experiences with elder abuse and toxic family dynamics, but narrative techniques were employed to sharpen the emotional stakes. If it's not landing right for you, plenty of other videos might fit your vibe better.